All people of goodwill share a simple principle. We cannot, in good conscience, have a community where people are forced to live outside. Nobody should have to live in a tent or a lean-to or under a tarp or an overpass or in a dilapidated vehicle. The causes of homelessness, they're not simple, they're many, they're complex. Clearly, the overarching challenge is a lack of housing and an overheated housing market. I think most of us agree on that. But there are a lot of other factors that come into play. An overburdened behavioral health system. Jails and foster care and psychiatric hospitals that discharge people not to housing but directly to the streets. We have been tackling this tremendous problem for a while now. This has been something we've been grappling with. But what we've lacked over the last 4 years is a federal partner in our efforts. We finally now have a Congress and a president who share our values and are willing to invest in solutions for our residents. Now, as part of the landmark American Rescue Plan, President Biden has awarded King County about $62 million for the specific purpose of taking on the challenge of homelessness in our communities. It's my goal to use that money to fund a variety of strategies that, in addition to everything that we are already doing, will move some 500 people inside, off the streets, provide 24-hour behavioral health supports as well, and help people in their times of greatest need. We're going to be adding, just starting here in this facility operated by the Salvation Army, we're going to be adding 28 new beds to this facility. And it has a current capacity to offer dignified shelter and case management and things as simple as indoor restrooms and access to a shower for some 240 residents. We're going to be growing that capacity. Out front, you're going to also see a small self-contained housing unit that was manufactured by a local company, Pallet. With 50 of these units, we will be creating and operating a shelter village in this area, giving people much improved options over the tents that you see all around town right now. And if you want to see those in action, you can see them at our Elliott Avenue facility, which that was a really exciting addition to the modular units we were able to set up there a year or two ago. We're also going to be providing vouchers and other assistance to 300 people who are currently staying in shelters. So this is the opportunity to get a voucher and be able to get an apartment, maybe even get a house. And these are folks, many of them, who are also going to be able to take advantage of the jobs program that I announced in White Center a few weeks ago. I don't know if any of you got to see that, but we're providing jobs for hundreds of people who are working to get out of homelessness. And they'll be doing the work that we all know needs to be done around here, working for the county to clean up parks or restore our natural areas or clean up city streets to help restore our region and have us ready for the recovery to come. And we're reopening the 35-bed shelter in the upstairs part of our 4th and Jefferson building. You might remember before the pandemic, we had an overnight shelter there. The downstairs is a day shelter, so people can come in, get off the streets during the day. But we had an overnight shelter there, and we're going to be able now to reopen that. I know a lot of you have seen, none of us could have missed the RVs that are parked all around the region. People are living in and on neighborhood streets and cul-de-sacs. Well, for those who are subsisting in their RVs, we are going to create and operate a safe parking lot with bathrooms, with showers, with electrical hookups. We are going to make it possible for people to be able to keep that asset they have, which is their home, but to be able to have it in a place that not only has all of those important utilities, but also has security to keep them safe. And I am also going to seek to bring a mechanic once in a while to help them fix up the rig, make it operable, so that they have the ability to be able to move on when they are ready to go. And that should be able to accommodate about 50 households who are trying to make it parked without electrical hookups or access to sewage or security all around the region. We're also going to offer shelter to an additional 60 households, and we are going to enhance behavioral health services. And this is a really critical part of this, and for me, whether we're talking about homelessness or detention or a lot of the systems we have, this is one of the big gaps. We're going to offer 24/7 behavioral health response on our streets. So I'm going to be putting a team out who can go out and engage the folks, and you all see them, don't you? Folks who are clearly in distress on our streets, and to try to figure out what it is we can do to help them, to bring them in, to provide them the support they need in order that they might be able to avoid a tragedy. In the worst case, coming into conflict with another resident or with the police. We want to get out there proactively and engage with them instead of waiting for someone to have to call 911. These and other investments, they are not going to solve homelessness by themselves, but they are going to make a big difference in people's lives, and I believe also in the life of our communities. Our efforts show that a united, compassionate community with help from the federal government is willing to take on these challenges, to work together, to make sure every person has the opportunity to thrive. The actions I'm announcing today will work in tandem with my Health Through Housing initiative. So I think every person here has heard me talking about the exciting new program, new opportunity we have, where we are going around the county and negotiating with cities and with people who own hotels to buy those hotels and nursing homes, to be able to move people out of chronic homelessness into a place of their own, give them a key to a room where they can get a full night's sleep, keep their things safe, take a shower in the morning, have the dignity of simply being able to make themselves a cup of coffee and watch the morning news. People are able to get better, to get rested, to get recentered, to be ready to accept the services that we can provide to get their lives on track again. And the folks who come into enhanced shelters like this, they'll be eligible to move to that next level when those rooms become available, to the emergency housing, then to the permanent supportive housing if that's what they need, or on to renting a place of their own if we're able to find them a job. This is an exciting change from even a year ago. And it's because the COVID crisis and the accompanying economic crisis has created opportunities to buy places like hotels, and also because we have new allies in Washington, D.C. who are willing to work with us. The actions I announced today in working with our Health Through Housing program will really be actively meeting needs here in the city of Seattle and throughout the region. We are looking forward to having some really exciting news, I think, on the progress of Health Through Housing in the coming weeks. And one of the things that has happened just within the last couple of weeks is the state legislature passed a bill that allows us to use that sales tax, that Health Through Housing money, to buy existing units and not to have to wait 3 or 4 years for that money to build a new unit. And I want to thank our state legislators for having made that possible. So between the American Rescue Plan and our local Health Through Housing initiative, we will make a significant impact in the lives of people who are experiencing homelessness, and we will increase the livability of our communities. This is a moment where I think we can have some real hope of turning the tide. I'd be happy to take any questions you might have. It's just too good to ask questions. So if I could, I want to turn to Leo Flor to describe in a little more detail, because we're going to be able to bring about 500 people, I think 502 was the exact count, in, and that's before we get to the additional vouchers, the 300 vouchers that will allow people to go out and get housing that's on the market. And The 500 is interesting because this model that the Salvation Army is running here, this is one we set up originally during the smoke crisis last year. And then what we found was people who were not willing to move out of their tent with all of their belongings to go to a overnight shelter where they got kicked out in the morning, they were willing to make the move to a shelter like this, which is 24 hours a day, where they have services, security, restrooms, and they can keep their things safe. I mean, think about it. If you had your own tent, if you'd become homeless because you'd lost a job or because of domestic violence or because you'd had a mental health breakdown, and everything in the world you had was there with you in your tent, you know, the wedding ring your mom left you when she passed, and your high school yearbook, and everything you'd managed to collect in this world was there, would you want to haul it all in and set it aside to sleep on a mat, to pick it all up and take it back out in the morning every single day? Probably not. You'd feel less secure doing that. But if you're able to come to a place like this where you have a unit of your own, you can have your things, and you know that they're going to be safe and you're going to be safe, it's much more likely that you would accept that you'd say, yes, that is a better situation for me. And that's what we're trying to create here. All the folks that you're seeing here in the tents under the overpasses, they don't want to be out there. That's a myth. The fact is we need to provide the kinds of places that simply meet their basic needs and allow them to be able to start taking control of their lives again with the aid of the services we can provide. I'm really excited about this, as you can probably tell. And I'd like to ask Leo Flor to describe in a little more detail. He's our Director of Community and Human Services, the different modalities we'll be using to accomplish this.
Thank you, Executive Constantine. Again, my name is Leo Flor, and I'm the Director of King County's Department of Community and Human Services. A chance to also acknowledge, we're talking about what it takes to bring people inside. I think one of the things that we're really clear here under the executive's leadership is that it takes people to bring people inside. So we're joined up here by representatives from the Salvation Army, from Catholic Community Services. They can be really excellent sources of answers to some questions that you might have about what it's like to live in this shelter. We have one of the pallet units outside, Catholic Community Services, Dan Wise, operates several of those up at another site that the executive made mention to at the Elliott site. And just to get into a little bit of detail, and maybe it'll spur some questions from you all, when we talk about bringing people inside this year, we're really talking about a mixture of different types of modalities. So some of that is going to be hotel vouchers for residents living in cars. Some of that is going to be new housing that we'll be bringing online in either leasing or purchasing. Some of that's going to be additional enhanced shelter inspired by the model that you see here. And some of that's also going to be those micro units, prefabricated, very much like the ones that you see in the pallet shelters. And so we have one of those that's set up in the parking lot, and we'll bring you by that. And then I'll ask Mark Ellerbrook here momentarily if he can bring us over to where we've got a space mocked up in this shelter for what it looks like for the 240 people who live here now and the 28 more who will come. So the executive's guidance to us in preparing a package for the council's review, which they are doing now, was it's got to be good, it's got to meet our values, and it's got to be based on evidence for what works. It's got to be urgent. We got to take that same spirit that we took from our COVID response last year that built this building with the help of our facilities management division. It's got to be urgent. We got to get people inside this year. And it's got to be something that uses one-time federal resources to make a big difference as we bring online our local initiatives like Health Through Housing, so that we're building a system that meets people where they are, brings them inside, and gives them the hope, the future, perhaps the employment and the support to keep moving into higher forms of housing, because we know that housing is ultimately the solution to homelessness. And that's where the executive started. That's where I'll end. If there are any questions for me, the Salvation Army, or the executive, otherwise I'll ask Mark to bring us around the corner.
And we also have the folks from Pallet here who can describe a little bit their manufactured units that we're currently using.
Any questions?
Yeah, I'll ask a question. Curious, how has it been going
Absolutely. So I'll start, and then I'll ask Simon or Captain Harvey to add on. So if we go back a year ago, we had basic congregate shelter. Some of the folks staying here were staying in places where they were 6 inches apart from each other. We began to see rates of spread in our congregate facilities that approached 30 and 40% of all residents in that building contracting COVID almost immediately. What we have seen since we have moved to increased spacing, this facility has tailor-made HVAC systems. Folks who are really into it, I think it's Merv. Again, indoor bathrooms. We're proud of the number of indoor restrooms that are available to people. So sanitation, social distancing, the ability to breathe clean air, and we have seen far reduced rates of spread. And when we do have a person who contracts COVID, we have a system in place. We move them into an isolation and quarantine facility that we also brought online last year that has now served over 2,700 people. And we've been able to really manage spread in all of these facilities where we have those, again, basics of spaced out folks, barriers between people, good air filtration, and then the hygiene resources that are necessary. Captain Harvey.
I think that I think this shelter is a perfect example of what it means to provide grace and dignity to people. It restores hope for individuals that walk through the front door. They're treated with grace and dignity from the moment they walk in the door. They're provided opportunities to rest and prepare themselves for what might be next in their lives. And then they're given the help to navigate their way to those new opportunities. If you were to walk through the shelter, what you would notice is that it's unbelievably clean. It's unbelievably fresh. It's sanitary. And we're able to provide a space that provides people individual space to have their own place, but also to have a network of resources around them that will help them succeed.
I'll ask you another question. I was hoping Executive Constantine, if you could talk a little more about just what it means to have the federal government supporting this work. Could you expand on that a little more? It has also received such a large amount.
Yeah. I will tell a little tale on the current HHS director who's in town right now. I had a meeting with him yesterday, and he just out and said, you know, as a former member of Congress, he represented the Skid Row area of Los Angeles. I can't believe I'm saying this, but you know, I'm here, and we have money. So what is the most effective thing we can do to help your community? I mean, you rarely hear that from anybody. And so it's very refreshing. I will tell you that during the Obama administration, we were able to develop a really strong partnership. And for example, they had an initiative that meshed with ours on veterans homelessness, on serving those who have served our country. And they said, how quickly can you get vets off the streets and into a better situation? And with federal resources, we were able to move very quickly on that. But then, as you know, administrations changed and priorities changed from the federal level. It means the world. We are an able region. We have a strong economy. We have a community that really believes in doing the right thing and will support us in doing the right thing. But as I told the secretary yesterday, there's still a capacity issue here. And federal help will allow us to get to scale, to be able to, as I said earlier, really turn the tide on this utterly unacceptable situation in our community. And I think that's true of other major metropolitan regions around the country. Others? We have some interesting things for you to look at, right? And you have folks from the private and public sector to be able to talk with you about what the opportunities are. I will tell you this, that the Health Through Housing Initiative, with some 1,600 units of emergency housing with services to keep people housed, plus another 500 units we're bringing online and the 300 vouchers, we're now starting to get to the scale where I expect we'll be able to observe the difference on the streets. And for those thousands of people, it will make the difference between a dead end and new opportunities for living a fulfilling life, an opportunity to thrive. So thank you all for being here to be part of this. I appreciate it.